This is Season 3 of Flute Unscripted. Hi, I'm Caity Massoud, and I sit down with a new artist every week and share their uncensored stories with you. This podcast is brought to you by Flute Center of New York, the marketplace for flutes. Join us, subscribe, rate and review us, and please stay tuned to the end of this episode for a special Flute Center of New York discount code for our podcast listeners. Nico Duchamp has made it his mission to carry on the French flute tradition. The French flutist, performer, and educator believes we owe quite a lot to the composers of the conservatory test pieces, the nuance of the language, and its influence on articulation and the overall refined French style. Dubbed the French flute teacher in the U.S., Nico has toured across the country giving masterclasses and mentoring young artists, eager to share his intrinsic knowledge passed down to him through the French flute teachers of the past, once students themselves of Taffanel and Gobert. Thank you so much, Nico Duchamp, for coming in today to the Flute Center of New York. You're giving a masterclass, which is wonderful.
Yes, in 2 hours.
In 2 hours. We're sneaking in this little chat while we can.
It's my pleasure to be here. Yes.
And everyone can obviously tell from your accent, you are French. You're very proud of your French heritage.
Well, this is what it is.
And you've dubbed yourself the French flute teacher as well. That's kind of your theme for your teaching. Why that theme?
Well, as you know, the flute playing and its development was born in France.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, and still, a great tradition of flute playing in France. And today, I think it still exists, but the tendency is to disappear because it become more international, which is fantastic at some point. But I'm very attached to the tradition of the playing because I think without this, nothing is possible, even the international playing.
And do you think that it's important to pass these down? Do you think it's kind of natural, it's intrinsic that we all have these characteristics already in our playing because of the lineage now? You know, the teachers of the teachers, and all these traditions have already been passed down in the States. So what do you think you offer that's unique?
Well, I grew up in Bordeaux, and maybe you know this, but there were a great flute playing tradition in Bordeaux. Georges Barrère was born there, Paul Taffanel. Well, Gobert was not in Bordeaux, but not too far. So, and my teacher there, and my first teacher was a student of Jules Taffanel. So he had this, it was a little bit strict because, they follow the tradition as, something extremely important. They took the flute very seriously at that time. And so I got this. And also, for some reason, I was very lucky. I had a student in Paris, let's say 7 years ago, who came at the lesson one day with the Philippe Gobert flute. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so when I discovered that flute, I started to make it work because the flute was in very bad shape, for sure. And at the time, everybody said to me, "Oh, Nico, you're crazy. You want to play that flute?" It was a Louis Lot, and Louis Lot are extremely difficult to play, which is true. But
yeah.
But well, I said, well, let's see, and we'll see, And actually, somebody helped me a lot to achieve that repair. It was Phil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk a lot about your Gobert project and about this flute. Before we delve into that, can you I think a lot of times when we talk about French flute playing, it can be very vague and very loose terminology.
Yeah.
Is there something, what does it mean to you, and what do you think?
Well, I think the flute playing is totally connected with the composers at the time.
Like with the French test pieces?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when you listen to Debussy music, it's very detailed
Yes.
in many ways, for articulation, for phrasing, for dynamics, for sound color. So obviously when you had to play that on the flute at the time, you couldn't play like only mezzo forte or forte and that's it. It was extremely refined. So I think there were a lot of influence on for the flute player because of this. It's not only Debussy, but you had like Honegger or Jacques Ibert, or where they were very different composers, of course. But the French in general, the French culture is very diverse in many ways. So of course the composers were also very creative at the time.
Right.
So that's why maybe we can say the French flute playing is based on more detail.
It's like the composers made flutists rise to the occasion. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's also connected with the language.
The articulation and speaking French.
Yes.
Yeah.
I discovered that when I moved to the US, because a lot of I found out that a lot of English speakers, they have difficulty for some things with staccato at first. Where I'm not saying the American they don't have a good staccato. Some they have, but it's not that obvious because ta 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 just doesn't exist in this language. For example, in Japan, yes, Japanese people they have this toko toko toko. So they, at first they don't have that kind of issue on the flute. So, but
would you say the French accent and French speaking is a little bit more forward?
Yeah.
And it gives you a more forward articulation as well.
Yeah. It's detailed.
Yeah.
And it's detailed also intellectually.
Yeah, which is a huge component.
So it's an ensemble. I mean, where the French flute playing, yes, you're right. What it is, what does it mean? It means a lot, and I would say it means nothing also. I mean, I don't think there are. I mean, it could be dangerous also to play an instrument to say, okay, this is my school. Because I would say it's more the way you've been taught. You've been taught in one way. There is a process or something like that. And that's good for your structure
to build on. Yeah.
But then everybody develop his own personality, and that's good and that's positive.
Yeah.
Well, that's the same with the piano and the violin, and when you listen the Russian school of violin or Oistrakh or something like that, they were extremely traditional. But it doesn't mean there is only way to play the violin.
True.
But the influence of this is here, and this is why I think it's extremely important, because there are different ways to approach the instrument. But some parameters, I mean, you cannot avoid. I mean, if your sound is not centered at all, if you don't have any articulation or any consciousness or how to do a piano dynamics or a forte or that, it's not about the French school.
Right, that's just flute playing in general. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
You understand?
Oh, yes.
So that's why for me that question is, it's hard to answer this kind of thing. It's important. yes, but it's not everything.
Sure.
After that, you don't need to be French to play well the flute, huh?
Right.
No. Not today.
Well, good, because I'm not French and I want to play well.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course. But also, well, there were some flutists were extremely important, specifically after the Second World War. Before the flute was just mostly and mainly for the orchestra.
Yeah.
You had some great flutists at the orchestra, fantastic players, but they didn't have the mindset to be like a solo or something, and it was probably almost impossible because the diffusion of information was not like today.
Right.
No, not at all. But after the war, let's say 1950, probably a little bit before, somebody like Jean-Pierre Rampal had a huge influence for the flute development. And he was trained also in the French flute school. His father was a fantastic flutist.
Yes.
Yeah. Joseph.
You took some lessons with Rampal.
Yeah. When I came
you were in
to
Paris.
yeah, a little bit.
A little.
A little bit.
What was that like?
Well,
do you have any good? I heard you have some good Rampal stories.
He was a fantastic person. I don't think he was thinking a lot on the flute, on the instrument. He was extremely gifted, for sure, and he was charismatic, very, very charismatic. This is what I get when I was 15 years old.
Right.
But
do you have a particular anecdote or story from one of your lessons with him?
Yeah. I remember. Well, the lesson were very short because he was always in between two planes. So one day I came to his place and he said, "Oh, I just have 10 minutes for you to play, but today is special." I said, "Okay." I said, "What?" So he said, "Look at this flute." And so he showed me one flute with diamond on it, and he said, "I use this flute for only the great circumstances, for the Queen of England and for you." that was Rampal.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
charm,
was very charming and very light, and
it comes through in his playing and his persona as well. Yeah.
Yeah. But he was extremely gifted. Extremely gifted.
You were a gifted young player growing up in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
You wanted to play at 3, right? And you waited. You had to wait.
Well, I would say it's. I was lucky, and still I realized later that I was lucky to have that kind of passion.
Yeah. It's very unusual, I think, at such a young age. Yeah.
But I have to say, I try to understand why it's happened that early in my life. And it's probably because I was fascinated, like a kid, about the flute sound. It sounded magic for me, but that was Rampal flute.
Yeah.
And also where I've been a lot to the opera with my parents when I was like 3 something, and I watched the flutist at the orchestra, and with the darkness and with the lights on the musician, only the flute was bright. So I was just fascinated. It was like I was thinking it was like a toy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was fast and easy.
Do you remember what they were playing on that first concert that you heard?
No.
Yeah.
No, but I remember the first recording of the flute, I remember this very well. It was Rampal on Telemann Fantasy. Yeah, he recorded this in the church, very lively acoustic. But for a kid like me,
yeah,
it was superb.
And you had a lot of success then, starting off very young as well. Did you think that you were equipped for that at a very young age, or do you think you needed to be a little bit more mature?
Well, I decided to become a flutist when I was 3, but it was impossible.
Right.
Of course.
Right.
So, my parents, brought me to the flute teacher there, and at the time, because they were like really strict on that, said, forget about it before 12. It's not the right age before. All right. So I had to wait. And I was fortunate to have a musician grandmother, an opera singer. And she loved music a lot. And I was kind of hard to everybody with, okay, I want to be a musician, I don't want to go to school. So that was a little bit embarrassing for everybody, but only my grandmother said, okay, if you want to be a musician, you can wait, but before you have to learn the notes, the theory, the composers, you have to sing, you have to listen, and
Yeah.
So we did together almost every day from the age, let's say 4 to 10, 11.
That's great.
Yeah, almost
your first
every
teacher.
morning before going to school.
Yeah.
Just like a little bit. So she was my first teacher, actually. And that was important, I think, because when I started the flute at the age of 11...
Then you're all equipped. You have at least the musical knowledge. Yeah,
I knew how to read, but it I don't know. It was. I'm not sure it was. There were a difference. My level in reading and that was good, and my level on the flute was nothing.
Yeah.
Even if it works, but. The combination, know very well the notes, and I didn't have at the time any sound problem. It goes by itself. So I was lucky, but at the same time, I couldn't see any. It was unuseful for me to practice. Yeah, I just play and that's it.
Just played when you had to. So there wasn't like a strict regimen of practicing.
Yeah, and my teacher was, I drove him crazy.
Yeah, all teachers can probably relate to this story, right?
Yeah. And he said, well, you play like that, but you don't know how to play.
Yeah.
And he was right, actually.
Right.
So, but I was fortunate to have a very experienced teacher, the first one, and also very honest, because most of the teacher would have said, oh Nico, fantastic, great, that's quick, you gifted, blah 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 blah, and that's it, first degree. But this is not the way it works, I think.
His family and teachers might have been tough on Nico, but he excelled quickly and was encouraged to study in Paris with Rampal. Nico became principal flute of the National Opera Comique in Paris and a soloist with leading French orchestras and chamber ensembles. Soon, however, the classical music scene in France had lost its luster for Nico, and he was drawn to the United States. Nico found that his audience here in the States was more receptive to new ideas. One big project he wanted to share with the flute community was Gobert Vivant, his performance of Gobert's music on Gobert's flute alongside archival material entrusted to him by the Gobert family. Through his work, Nico found that he developed a real relationship with this particular instrument. Were you a little bit scared about the long run when you were in Paris? You had a lot of opportunities there, and it seems like they maybe started to dry up some orchestras. Seems like they might have lost some funding or just had less concerts. and you decide to leave.
Yeah.
Was that why?
Well, that was an ensemble of circumstances. That was not that hard for me somewhere. The situation in France were not that good, I think. And at the same time, my situation in the US was better. So the choice was easy to do.
Why do you think the situation in the States is a little bit better, and why there is such a close-knit flute community?
Well, I think for me it was more open. It's more open mind. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's more open mind, because maybe what I said, when you are in a traditional country, you at some point, when you want to go above this or do something with not really like traced, then it's extremely difficult. It is.
Yeah, hard to forge a new path.
Yeah. And I think for me, the US, I mean, the contact with people was easier, and still. And
was a large part of that due to Flute Center as well? I know you came here and you were friends with our owner,
Flute
Phil.
Center was it was a fantastic story. I was on tour, like in 2010, I think, something like that, or 11. And I didn't know anything about, the flute world in the US. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And I looked up online and I saw Flute Center of New York, and I said, well, could be interesting to show to somebody who owns a flute store in New York, to show the Gobert flute. So I didn't play on it at the time, not really. And so I brought the instrument here to Phil. And his reaction was unbelievable for me, because mostly in France, I wouldn't say it was normal, but almost. People thought it was interesting. That's it.
Yeah.
But here, Phil,
the Gobert flute, yeah.
You don't understand what it is, and blah, 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 blah. So it started that way, and then he started to, he helped a lot. He repaired it a little bit, which was important at the time. And also he talked with a lot of people here, and they were all interested in that. But now I understand why. I'm better.
Yes.
It's funny, because when you're born in something, I wouldn't say it's casual. I knew it was not casual, that story. But I didn't know about the importance of that.
Right. And you came into this flute introduced to it through a student. It was her family's flute, Gobert's flute, passed down to her, right?
Yeah.
And the family in 2009, I believe,
Yes.
put together a project with you to kind of
Yes.
Create a tour and a documentary and show the flute and play the flute.
It was in 2011, exactly. Yeah, the beginning of 11, because that was the 75 years of the death of Philippe Gobert, and one of his relative, she wanted to let people know about him.
Has playing Gobert's flute on his repertoire given you a new perspective on his music?
Yes. Well, it's an ensemble of things. I mean, but just the fact of Louis-Lot,
playing the flute in general, it's more difficult.
Yeah. But the Louis-Lot flute is something extremely special. It's today it's very special. At the time, it was probably a fantastic flute, but it was totally appropriate to the condition of playing at the time. So there were a lot of chamber music. Chamber music mostly were in the salon in Paris, in the salon. It was not in big hall in Tokyo, 3,000 seats.
Right.
So obviously the instruments were built for that too. So the instrument is very sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not designed to play super loud. Not at all. So if you approach the instrument in a modern way, you don't have that.
How do you think that translates to modern flutes and playing his music on modern flutes? Should we approach it with more of that sentiment, or is it?
Yeah, I would say it's more human.
Yeah.
It's more human. I mean, if you don't feel the music on the Gobert flute, if you don't listen
Mm-hmm.
to it inside of you, well, finally, if you're not a good musician at that time,
Mm-hmm.
you get nothing. There is no sound. Almost no sound.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you want to fight on this instrument, it just doesn't work. You cannot fight. Well, you cannot fight any flute, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But those one particularly, no. And they are not in the same tuning as today.
Right.
Right? So that means if you don't listen, you don't play in tune. Today the flute, they are more developed on that, yes. And they are pre-made,
Mm-hmm.
I would say. So at some point it's positive, but at some point it's negative. Because if you learn flute in a pre-made flute, I would say, understand, it's not good. You don't know how to play the instrument. Mm-hmm. And after a little while, you face exactly the same problematic as you will have on a simple flute.
Mm.
Maybe, I don't know if we can compare that like a car. If you don't know how to drive and you get like the last sport car, you get directly into the wall.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to manage.
Mm-hmm.
So you understand?
Yeah. So you have to be a strong enough player to wear any flute.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. It's better to start probably on a simple flute.
Right.
Something works everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
kind of in tune. So, because it helps to understand how a flute works. And that's important specifically for the young.
Right. Do you think people start off too early on these,
It looks like that sometimes.
Sports car, if you will, kind of flutes?
It looks like that.
Yeah.
In Asia.
So they don't develop the skills
to
play something that's a little bit more difficult.
To my opinion, it goes too fast.
Right.
But everything goes too fast, to my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
There are some situations you don't have the choice. When you are in the music school, you have your performance to do, you have your audition, so you have like a deadline.
Yeah.
And that's necessary. But the big picture of playing an instrument cannot be based on being fast.
Yeah.
But just because, there is a necessary mental development,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're not ready at 12, but at 14 you are.
Yeah. Or maybe you're not ready at 20, but at 40 you are.
Yeah. And maybe at the age of 50 you will consider this kind of music like that,
Mm-hmm.
but you have, and 20 years later you can see different way.
Yeah.
But that will happen only if you practice.
Mm-hmm. And we were saying before, if you're with it for the long run. Too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you don't practice, the story will stop here.
Will peter out.
Or you maintain something, that's
Mm-hmm.
it. But playing an instrument, myself, I don't see any interest on blowing on a tube all my life.
Mm-hmm.
This tube has to mean something else.
Right. And what else does it mean to you?
Well, it's a voice. It's another kind of voice.
Mm-hmm.
And the I would say the work could be to make it organic as most as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's difficult.
To end maybe with some fun stories, something light. I heard that you have a funny story about not drinking wine in Bordeaux.
Well, no. The story was, well, I mean, in Bordeaux,
It's wine country.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
one of the great wine country.
Oh, I know, yes.
So, well, at my time when I was young
Mm-hmm.
and living there, everybody got his own wine, you know.
Mm.
And when I was like 6, I used every time on November, because at November you take the grapes
Yep.
off and blah, blah, blah. So I used to go to climb onto the cuves where the wine stay, open the cuve. You say the cuve, right? The big.
The barrel.
Yeah. The big barrel.
Yeah.
And I open this and I smell, I smell this, and the effect of the alcohol makes your head a little bit
Yeah.
dizzy, and that was fantastic for me. But one day I did that and I fell into the barrel, and I couldn't breathe, because you cannot breathe on that, and I didn't know how to swim, so I was almost dead. And hopefully my grandfather, he heard me, and he gave me a cord, and but because of that I didn't drink any alcohol till the age of like 22, 23.
Wow.
I couldn't, and one day I understood why.
Yeah.
And then I came back to the great wine.
So you almost died in a wine barrel.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
That's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for chatting with me. It was a pleasure.
Me too.
And I look forward to the masterclass.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
You very much.
Thank you, Nico.
Thank you.
We are certainly glad Nico survived his traumatic near-death experience to share his music and proficiency with French flute literature and style. You can check out his website, FrenchFluteTeacher.com, to see his updated masterclass and recital touring schedule. Thank you, Nico Duchamp, for the interview. The music on this episode features excerpts from Bach's Orchestral Suite No. 2 in B minor and Fantasy on Themes from Rigoletto by Genet. This has been an episode of Flute Unscripted. This podcast is sponsored by Flute Center of New York. Visit their website at flutesforsale.com for the largest selection of new and pre-owned instruments. Use this season's promo code LISTEN for a special deal of $50 off any purchase of $4.99 or more. You can follow the Flute Center on Instagram and like them on Facebook to stay up to date on the latest events and masterclasses. Special thanks to our owner Phil Unger, the Flute Center team, and Stefan Huskoldson for our theme music.